Be me, 43 years old, tenured professor in gender studies at a decent public university in Fort Collins, Colorado, spent 21 years of my life trying to build rooms where women could talk without getting steamrolled, whole your voice matters thing, whole call out gross behavior without getting punished. Thing, always thought I was one of the sane ones, the careful ones, not the type yelling at dudes on sidewalks, not the type demanding cartoonish nonsense, just wanted basic fairness and a little safety. Publish papers on consent models, workplace equity, believe lived experience frameworks, told myself I was doing the bridge-building version of activism winter term kicks off. And something feels off upper-level seminar, usually lively. Normally the guys in class will challenge a reading, now and then. Sometimes it's annoying, sometimes it actually helps discussion, even when they mansplain. At least they're present this time. The 6 guys in my class of 28 just don't exist. They show up, they type notes, they hand in clean assignments, and they never say a single word. Not angry silence, not protest. Silence, just the kind of silence you get from someone waiting for a dentist to finish drilling. One kid stands out. Name's Ethan. Last year, in my intro course, he was sharp, thoughtful comments pushed back in ways that actually made the room smarter. Now he just stares into his laptop like it's an oxygen mask. Screen glow on his face, dead behind the eyes. After week 4, I decide I'm not letting it slide anymore. Catch one of them after class. Pick the guy who looks least like he's trying to disappear. His name's Logan, seems pretty normal, polite. Ask him straight up why he's not engaging with the material. He does that thing where he shifts his weight like he's on a balance board, keeps glancing at the door like it's a fire exit. Finally says, the readings are really interesting, and he's learning a lot. I press a little, tell him I've noticed none of the men are participating. He gives me this tiny smile that doesn't touch his eyes at all, and he goes, super careful. I think it's better if I just listen and learn, honestly. Thanks me for my time, like I'm customer service, and leaves fast enough. I don't even get a follow-up question out. Something about it sticks under my skin for days, like I stepped on glass and can't find the shard. Bring it up to my colleague in sociology, Dave Guy's 62. Been teaching since Clinton was a fresh scandal, usually supportive of my work. Not one of the bitter old heads the second I mention men going silent. His face changes like he's been waiting for someone else to finally see it. He tells me he's been tracking enrollment trends and classroom behavior, for a paper pulls up a spreadsheet like it's a crime scene. Photo shows me his preliminary numbers, male enrollment in courses taught by women, faculty down 15% over the last 5 years. In classes specifically labeled gender/sexuality/women focused, down 29%, and the guys who still enroll. Participation drops off a cliff office hour, visits from male students to women, faculty down 38%. Then he shows me the survey comments he's been collecting. Anonymous cross-department guys describing how they calculate which professors are safe, which rooms are social minefields, which discussions can turn them into the day's cautionary tale. One response is from a 22-year-old engineering student. He wrote that he wanted to take a gender and fiction class because the book list looked legitimately cool. Didn't do it because he couldn't risk saying the wrong thing. Couldn't risk some clumsy phrasing getting read as hostile or threatening. Couldn't risk becoming an example in front of everyone. Another comment is from a 19-year-old business major, said he was genuinely interested in a woman professor's research and wanted advice. But mentorship means one-on-one meetings, and he wasn't going to put either of us in that situation. He called it a situation like meeting with your professor is the kind of thing you avoid for self-preservation. I tell myself, okay, it's one colleague's early data. Maybe it's skewed, maybe it's noisy, but I can't unsee it. Now start paying attention. Like my brain flipped a switch, notice my TA, a woman in our grad program, gets way more questions in her office hours than I do. And it's not even subtle male students line up outside her door to ask stuff. They could absolutely ask me. They try to play it casual, like they just happen to be there. Bring it up to her. One day she hesitates, then admits some of them have said. Outright they feel more comfortable with her when she asks why. They give these soft excuses. You seem more approachable. I didn't want to bother Professor Morgan, but we both know that's not the real reason. You can feel the real reason sitting in the room, like stale air once I start looking. It's everywhere. University rolls out a mandatory mentorship program for junior faculty department. Chair pulls me aside in the hallway. Low voice tells me 3 different early career guys requested male mentors specifically. When he asked for reasons, they gave vague stuff about shared interests, except their interests line up closer to mine than to the men they picked. Chair looks exhausted saying it, like he's been refereeing invisible tension for months, and it's chewing through him. Go to a department mixer a week later. Try to make small talk with a new male. Hire polite guy, professional conversation, lasts maybe 2 minutes before it turns into that stiff, networking voice. And I notice how he's standing. He positions himself so we're in clear view of multiple people. Like he's choosing camera angles, room gets loud. I lean in a little so I can hear him. He doesn't step closer, he just raises his voice and keeps the same careful distance, not rude, not cold, just deliberate. Later, I watch him talk to my male colleague by the drinks table. Same guy, totally different body language, laughing, relaxed standing, close like normal humans. The ease of it hits me in the gut, and this ugly little feeling starts gnawing at the back of my brain, because I'm not imagining any of this. It's a strategy, so I do what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I research, spend weeks buried in studies I normally wouldn't touch. Young men's social behavior, dating patterns, workplace anxiety, risk avoidance. And the numbers that keep popping up are insane. Like the floor is shifting under me and I'm only now noticing it's moving. Dig into the numbers, and it's not just my classroom being weird. Men 19 to 29 reporting actual romantic relationships at the lowest level. Anyone's tracked surveys saying most young guys straight up never approach women in public anymore. Not at bars, not at campus events. Not even the, hey, can I buy you a coffee stuff. Workplace studies are just as grim. Men refusing to travel one-on-one with female coworkers, won't do closed-door meetings, won't get in an elevator alone if there's an easy out. Always angling for a third person in the room, like they're arranging witnesses. Then the friendship data hits rates of young men saying they have 0 close friends, shooting up emotional isolation. Measures basically pegged. It's like somebody turned down the human connection dial and snapped it off. And it's not even just the US, cross-country stuff, shows the same pattern across a bunch of Western countries. Different languages, same avoidance, find research on men's support groups and the kind of conversations happening there. Read through transcripts and notes, and it's all the same. Themes, fear, retreat, careful, calculated risk management. They talk about interacting with women. The way you talk about handling a live wire every little moment, treated like it could blow up their education, their job, their reputation. Guys describing literal cost-benefit math on basic human behavior. One study has interview quotes from men who have basically quit dating. 25-year-old says he went on 4 dates in the last year and a half. Says every single one was a disaster. Not because the women were mean, not because they didn't click, because he was so tense about saying the wrong thing. He could barely talk, like his brain was running a real-time compliance checklist instead of a conversation. Another guy, 21, says he liked a girl in his stats class. Never did anything about it. His logic is brutal. Even if she's interested, the risk of reading a signal wrong and making her uncomfortable isn't worth it. He talks like he's solving for X chance of a good outcome versus size of a bad outcome. And the bad outcome category in his head isn't just embarrassment, it's being reported, being labeled, having his name become a story, losing internships, scholarships. Opportunities says the math never comes out in favor of trying. Then there's this whole section on college guys, changing their behavior in groups, won't study alone with female classmates, won't offer to walk anyone to their car, even if it's late and the lot is dark, because they don't want to be seen as following or put someone in a position where she has to decide if she trusts him. And the irony almost makes me nauseous. They were taught women's safety matters most, so they translate that into, my presence is a safety variable, and if my presence can be a threat, the safest thing is removing myself from the equation, and I start hearing my own lectures in my head, my own phrases, my own slides. 2 decades teaching power dynamics, believe women recognize capacity to intimidate, understand how harm happens. All of it true, all of it necessary. But what does it sound like to an 18-year-old boy trying to be decent? A kid who doesn't want to scare anyone, a kid who takes the lesson seriously. We told them to be hyper-aware of their power. We told them women's comfort comes first. We told them impact beats intent. We told them to listen, don't dominate, don't assume. We showed them a museum of every way men have failed, and then we just kind of stopped. We didn't give them a blueprint for what healthy interaction looks like after they internalize all that. We handed them a detailed map of landmines and called it education. So the boys who were sensitive, the ones who actually cared, did the safest thing they could think of. They went quiet. They backed away. They made themselves small, and the ones who don't listen, the ones who don't care, the ones who bulldoze social feedback, they're probably doing just fine, still flirting, still confident, still taking up oxygen in every room. And I hate the thought forming, but it won't leave. We accidentally built a filter. The considerate ones vanish. The shameless ones remain sit in my office one afternoon with papers spread out like a crime board, tabs open, spreadsheets, quotes, graphs, and something in my chest starts to split. I've spent my whole adult life trying to make things better for women. Safer rooms, louder voices, fewer predators with free reign. I believed in it so hard it felt like religion, and I never wanted this. Never wanted boys to grow into men, terrified of basic connection. Never wanted women to inherit a world where the decent men have retreated into protective silence. Never wanted to replace old barriers with new ones. I help design, and then my brain does the cruelest thing possible. It brings up my own kid. My son's 27, now hasn't had a serious relationship in about 4 years. Last Thanksgiving he told me dating is just too messy now. Said it's easier to focus on his job and his projects and his dumb little hobbies. He laughed when he said it, like it was a joke on him. I remember smiling and thinking he was just being selective. Now I'm wondering what calculations he's doing when he looks at a woman and decides not to speak, wondering what he absorbed, growing up with a mom who taught consent and power and harm for a living. Then I think about my nephew. He visited in January, second year, at a college down in Arizona. He mentioned he sits in the back of all his classes. Now doesn't ask questions anymore, doesn't raise his hand, doesn't argue, doesn't volunteer examples, muttered something about not wanting to be that guy. I asked what guy. He just shrugged and said, I wouldn't get it. And at the time, I got annoyed. Now I can feel it clicking into place like a lock, and I just lose it. Lock my office door, turn off the lights, and it's not a few polite tears. It's full body. Ugly sobbing at my desk, like someone died because something did. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. We were supposed to create understanding, not fear. Supposed to build connection, not turn every interaction into a hazard assessment. Supposed to make things better. And I keep thinking about this conference I went to 2 years ago. Workshop on addressing male resistance in feminist spaces. We spent an hour strategizing what to do with men who go silent in discussion. Keep thinking about that workshop from a couple years back, the one on male resistance in feminist spaces. We treated male silence like it was hostility, like it was fragility, like it was passive-aggressive punishment. But sitting there now, staring at all this data, the question hits me, what if it wasn't resistance? What if it was retreat? What if they were doing exactly what we told them to do? Make space, don't dominate, listen more than you talk. And we read their compliance like defiance because it didn't look like the kind of participation we wanted. Can't stop researching now. Once you see a pattern, your brain won't let you unsee. It start pulling workplace mentorship studies. And it's not just students. It's the grown men with mortgages and job titles doing the same risk math. Senior men increasingly refusing to mentor junior women, not in a I hate women way, in a I don't want to get ruined way. They cite perception, they cite time alone, they cite misunderstandings, they cite it only takes one accusation, and my stomach turns, because we fought like hell for women to get access to mentorship and sponsorship. We needed those doors opened, and now I'm watching the doors quietly swing shut, because men are choosing protection over support. Find a survey of male executives. The number is ridiculous. Something like 69%. Say they're uncomfortable with one-on-one meetings with junior female employees. Now, not because they're monsters, not because they're secretly predators waiting for their chance, because they're scared, They ran the cost-benefit analysis and decided their careers and names aren't worth the exposure. And the part that makes me feel sick is how familiar the logic sounds. Assess risk, respect boundaries, avoid situations that can be misread, exactly what we hammered into them. Except when you apply it at scale, it turns into a new kind of exclusion. Women can't move up without mentorship and sponsorship. Men are holding a lot of the senior roles. Men won't mentor anymore because the environment makes it feel like a liability bomb. So everyone loses, start drafting a paper anyway, because my brain keeps yelling, this is happening and nobody's saying it out loud. I want to sound the alarm. I want people to understand the unintended consequences, the overcorrection, the way we might be losing a whole cohort of young men to fear and isolation, and by extension, leaving women with fewer healthy connections too. After a week of writing and rewriting, I show the draft to a colleague, Melissa. We've been close professionally for like 14 years. Co-taught, co-wrote, survived committees together. She sits in the chair across from my desk and reads in silence. At first she's neutral, then her mouth tightens, then her eyes get colder, line by line. Finally she looks up and goes, "Are you seriously blaming feminism for men acting badly?" I start explaining, fast, like I can talk my way out of the trap. Tell her that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about incentives, behavioral responses, systems. She cuts me off. Mid-sentence tells me men choosing to isolate instead of learning how to behave is on them, not us. Says, if they're scared, Good says, they're scared because they can't get away with things anymore. Says this is what accountability looks like, and I should know better than to coddle them. We argue for almost an hour, voices low but sharp, like knives kept polite. She keeps saying, not our responsibility. I keep saying, I'm not assigning blame, I'm describing outcomes. She leaves angry, like, door closes too hard angry. And then she doesn't speak to me for almost 2 weeks, walks past my office like I'm a stranger, and the message lands loud and clear. Publishing this would be professional suicide. It would look like betrayal. It would get framed as Professor Morgan says feminism went too far. And that's not even the point, but points don't matter when people only read headlines. So I sit there with this draft on my laptop and feel trapped, because how do I not say something if I think it's real? And how do I say it without burning down my own career and everything I've built, spend nights awake staring at the ceiling, brain chewing on the same questions taught thousands of students over 2 decades? How many young men sat in my classes and swallowed messages that made them afraid of themselves? How many women are going to age into a world where half the population has learned to keep a careful, sterile distance, start replaying specific lessons, like my mind is torturing me, on purpose, 1 unit on microaggressions, all the tiny ways men take up space without noticing, interrupting, correcting, talking longer, turning everything into debate club. We even covered body language, eye contact, that lingers too long, standing too close, chatting with someone who didn't invite it, how small things can stack into intimidation or harassment. I remember the guys in class taking notes, like it was a lab procedure, nodding seriously. And then I see them now, avoiding eye contact, completely keeping 2 arm lengths away, never starting a conversation unless spoken to. First, the perfect students did exactly what I taught. Then the workplace dynamics unit, me talking about power differentials, about how senior men have to examine themselves, how you can't treat junior women like mentees without being honest about temptation, bias, abuse. All of it. I meant it as self-awareness, appropriate boundaries. Don't be the guy who uses access as leverage, but the lesson they heard was stay away entirely. Then the consent unit weeks on. Enthusiastic yes, silence isn't consent. You don't get to assume comfort. You are responsible for making sure the other person feels safe. I watched male students become more conscientious in real time, more careful, more thoughtful, and also more paralyzed. Because if anything short of an enthusiastic verbal yes is a no, fine, but if asking directly feels aggressive and hinting feels risky and flirting feels like pressure, then what's left? Apparently the answer they land on is nothing, do, nothing, say nothing, want nothing, because nothing is the safest choice. And then I start thinking about our vocabulary, toxic masculinity, male, privilege, patriarchy, rape culture, all real concepts, all worth naming and examining. But what does it feel like to be a 20-year-old guy hearing that your gender is toxic, that your presence is privilege that diminishes other people, that you're part of a system built to oppress. Even if you personally never hurt anyone, you're still complicit. We meant it structurally academically. They hear it personally. Some of them get defensive and angry. Those are easy to write off as not getting it, but the other type, the ones who take it to heart, they try to fix themselves by subtracting themselves. Then, like a sick joke, we have mandatory faculty training on harassment prevention. Everybody in a beige conference room with a slide deck and bad coffee, and the trainer is literally instructing us on how to avoid anything that could be misinterpreted. Don't meet with students behind closed doors. Don't communicate after hours. Don't get overly friendly. Don't do anything that could look like favoritism. Maintain professional distance at all times. And I'm sitting there thinking, we're telling this to everyone. We're institutionalizing separation. We're turning be careful into policy. We're basically formalizing distrust while insisting we're building inclusion. It's like we're making it official that men and women shouldn't be alone together because the risk is too high, and nobody in the room seems to notice how insane that is. Next seminar, I watch my male students with new eyes. They're not hostile. They're not checked out. They're not disrespectful. They're careful, painfully careful. They wait for women to speak. First, they keep their comments short. They measure every word like it has a price tag. They take up as little physical space as possible. Back straight, hands folded, eyes on the screen, making themselves small and quiet and unobtrusive. Everything we said we wanted, except we also said we wanted dialogue, engagement, real connection. And you can't demand connection from someone. You've trained to treat connection as danger. So they pick the safer option. Silence after class. Ethan finally shows up to office hours, first time, all semester. He knocks like he's asking permission to exist, walks in, and immediately starts apologizing for taking up my time. Apologizes again when he sits down, hands shaking just a little, when he opens his notebook, and after like 2 minutes of nervous throat clearing, he asks me a question about the thesis idea he's working on. His question is actually good, like genuinely sharp shows. He's been chewing on the material instead of just memorizing vocabulary. I tell him that. Tell him it's insightful. Tell him he's on to something worth building out. Start pointing him toward a couple authors, a couple angles he could develop. Watch his shoulders drop like he's been holding his breath for weeks. He looks relieved, and then I catch something else on his face. Not anger, not smugness, just this tired sadness, like he's grateful, but also kind of mourning the fact he had to be this careful just to ask a question when we wrap up. I thank him for coming by. I even say it out loud, like an idiot. I wish more students engaged like this. He gets up, packs his notebook, pauses at the door, with his hand on the knob, turns back and says something that just rips through me. Says he almost didn't come. Says he didn't want to make me uncomfortable. Says he's heard a lot of professors don't want to deal with male students one-on-one anymore. Says he understands why. Says he doesn't blame anyone. And then, super quietly, he says, it's lonely. Lonely trying to get through college without mentorship or guidance or any real connection to faculty. Lonely trying to figure out how to be a good person when every possible move feels loaded. Says most of his friends have basically stopped trying. They keep their heads down, get the degree, disappear, and then he's gone before I can form a response that isn't useless. I just sit there after he leaves door closed, office silent, except the heater clicking, and that word keeps bouncing around in my skull. Lonely like he dropped it on my desk and walked out. So I do the thing I always do when I'm spiraling. I open more studies, search male loneliness until my eyes blur, and it's worse than I want it to be. Loneliness measures climbing year after year, depression and anxiety, trending up suicide risk stats that make my throat tighten, friendship circles, shrinking support systems, thinning out. And the pattern underneath it all looks like rot, spreading through floorboards. We spent years telling men emotional vulnerability is okay. Talk about your feelings, reach out, don't bottle it up. And then we helped build a culture where they're afraid to connect with half the population. And it's not like women's lives exist in a sealed, women-only bubble either. Women's support networks often include men, friends, partners, mentors, co-workers, who aren't weird about it. Men's support networks used to include women too. Sisters, girlfriends, friends, older women, mentors. Normal human closeness. What happens when a whole gender decides? The safest strategy is to keep distance from the other gender. Everyone ends up stranded. Everyone ends up alone in their own separate little bunkers. Stare at my computer screen and do something that makes me laugh in the worst way. Start drafting an email to Ethan, something simple. You're always welcome during office hours. Don't hesitate to come by. I'm glad you're engaging. Then I hover over it and delete it, because my brain immediately goes, what if that's inappropriate? What if encouraging a male student to meet with me is somehow a problem? And I realize what I'm doing. I'm running the same dumb risk calculation. He's running risk assessment on a basic professional interaction. And that's the part that chills me. It's not just the students, it's not just men, it's all of us. Now, we're all doing the math. Semester keeps moving, pattern doesn't change, quiet. Men taking notes like they're trying not to be perceived engaged, women driving the discussion, everybody maintaining a careful, visible distance. It looks like the thing we said we wanted, and it feels dead. Like somebody completed the quest, but the reward is just a gray screen. Like, congrats, you removed the risk, and the prize is emptiness. I give a lecture on feminist ethics of care, the whole idea that relationships and interdependence should be centered, that community matters, that moral life is about connection, not just rules and punishment. I'm talking about mutual responsibility and human bonds. And for the first time all term, one of the guys raises his hand. Not Ethan, another one. A quiet kid named Tyler, who's been basically invisible. The entire room turns to look because it's that unusual. Like a dog just started speaking English, Tyler asks, sincerely. Not as a gotcha, how we're supposed to build those kinds of connections across gender. If every interaction is a potential minefield, asks what the practical method is, how do you do community when you're terrified of being misunderstood? The whole class goes silent. I feel my face get hot because I can tell what's coming next. Me not having a real answer. I fumble something about thoughtfulness and communication and respect, the same safe words that fit in any syllabus. It sounds hollow, even while I'm saying it. Tyler nods, politely, doesn't argue, doesn't push back, doesn't make it messy, just accepts my non-answer like it's a receipt. He can't return and goes quiet again. And I hate how much I want him to fight me, want any of them to fight me, because conflict would mean they're still in the room with me. Silence just means they've already left. Mentally spring comes. I go to an academic conference like I always do. Panel on gender dynamics in educational settings. A researcher presents data that's basically the same story I've been drowning in. Young men, withdrawing interaction, fear, avoidance patterns in Q and A. A senior feminist scholar stands up, voice calm, confident, practiced. Says this framing gives too much credit to male fragility. Says men have always found excuses to exclude women, and this is just the newest version. Says if men choose isolation over accountability, that's their choice and their problem. The room applauds, and I feel this insane urge to stand up to say no. You're missing something, to offer the other interpretation, to say, these guys aren't sneering. They're scared, but I stay seated because suddenly I can see the outcome before it happens. How it would sound, how it would be quoted, how it would travel through departments, like gossip, how it would attach itself to my name, and that's when it hits me. I'm doing it too. Same calculation risk of speaking up versus the cost of shutting up. And the silence wins. Walk out of that room, hating myself. A little fly home with my forehead against the cold airplane window, feeling like I just watched something important break and nobody cares. And my brain keeps trying to defend itself. Decades of work can't all be wrong. The protections mattered, the changes mattered, the awareness mattered, the voices we amplified mattered. There were real harms that needed naming, real predators who needed consequences, real structures that needed dismantling. But somewhere in the execution, something went sideways. We built a system that protects by preventing that, ensures safety through separation, solves certain problems by creating brand new ones. And I keep wondering if there was another path, a way to teach power without teaching fear. A way to raise awareness without building walls. A way to demand accountability without creating paralysis. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe this was baked in. Maybe you can't tear down a system without collateral damage, but collateral isn't abstract. It's real. People, real young men learning to never reach out. Real young women wondering why men feel distant and wary. Real connections that never happen. Real loneliness spreading like mold in the background. Semester ends, I grade final papers with that numb, hollow feeling, and Ethan's is near the top of the stack, and it's brilliant. He writes this careful thesis on feminist ethics, and he lays out a double bind for conscientious men. They're told to recognize power and privilege, which requires awareness and engagement. They are told to step back and make space, which often turns into withdrawal and silence. You can't fully do both at the same time. If a man engages, he risks being seen as dominating. If he withdraws, he risks being seen as resistant or hostile. Either way, he loses, and then he writes this line that makes my stomach drop. The only winning move is not to play, so they don't. He backs it all with sources, keeps it respectful, keeps it measured. And at the end, he says he still believes in equality, still believes in women's rights and dignity. But he honestly doesn't know how to practice it without disappearing. Grade Ethan's paper. It's honestly one of the best things I've read all semester. Give him an A without even hesitating. Then I do the annoying professor thing and write a bunch of margin comments, tell him his observations are sharp, tell him the way he framed the double bind is valuable, tell him he's asking the kind of question that actually matters. Write a long note at the end, don't give up on engagement, keep pushing. The room needs voices like yours. And halfway through writing it, I feel my mouth go sour. Because I'm telling a 21-year-old kid to take risks I refuse to take myself. I won't publish my own draft. I wouldn't stand up at that conference panel. I won't challenge the dominant framing in any public way. But here I am, basically asking him to keep walking into the minefield. With a smile, hypocrisy tastes like pennies. Summer break hits, campus gets quiet in that eerie way. Like the whole place is holding its breath. Meet an old grad school friend for lunch. Her name's Sarah. She went corporate years ago. HR track. Now she's a VP at a big healthcare company outside Dallas. We sit at some overpriced place with metal chairs and salads pretending to be food, catch up on the usual, can you believe we're this old stuff? Then the conversation drifts to what we've both been noticing, how things have shifted over the last decade. Sarah rubs her forehead and starts listing policies like she's reading a police report, separation protocols, meeting guidelines, travel rules, documentation requirements, says male execs now refuse to sponsor junior women. Not, I hate women, refuse more, like I am not risking my whole life. Refuse they won't travel together, won't do dinner meetings, won't do mentorship. That requires consistent one-on-one time, and the opportunities that used to come from that, they just don't happen. She says the company hired consultants, did training, tried incentives, made it clear sponsorship was part of leadership expectations. None of it worked because fear beats policy. Every time she says it quietly, like she's confessing a crime, I think we overcorrected. Then she immediately adds, she can't say that at work, that would end her career. But watching women's advancement stall because men won't engage feels like losing ground. They bled for, we just sit there for a minute. Forks on plates, AC humming, both of us staring at the table like it's got answers written on it, both thinking about the path that brought us here, both complicit in our own ways, both trapped inside the machine we helped build. Sarah finally asks what we could have done differently. I open my mouth and nothing comes out because everything we fought for was necessary. Awareness of harassment, awareness of assault, awareness of discrimination, microaggressions, all of it. Real accountability mattered, consequences mattered, believing victims mattered. And yet, the way it got implemented, the way it got absorbed, created this climate of fear that's chewing through everything. Maybe there was no clean way through. Maybe this is just the cost of progress. Maybe it's a temporary adjustment, and people will relearn how to act like humans again. But then the darker thought shows up. What if it isn't temporary? What if an entire generation grows up, never learning how to connect across gender without panic? What if separation becomes the default setting? What if we did permanent damage, drive home after lunch, and the tears hit again, hands tight on the steering wheel, blinking hard at red lights? Like, I can blink the feeling away. It's happening a lot lately, and that's the cruel part. This was supposed to feel like victory, like justice, like we made the world better. Instead, it feels like everyone losing in slow motion, get home, sit down, and start writing something. I know I'll never share, not a paper, not a conference talk, just an essay for the folder of things that can't exist. Title it something brutal. Men went quiet because of us. And I dump everything into it, All the studies, all the classroom moments, all the quotes that won't leave my head, write about intentions versus outcomes. Write about how the most conscientious guys took the message the hardest. Write about how we accidentally filtered for the worst behavior by making good behavior feel impossible. Write about loneliness, isolation, fear. Write about my own crisis of faith without using that cheesy phrase. Write about still believing in equality while staring at this new imbalance we helped create. Write about not having a fix. Write about being scared to even try. Finish it around 2 a.m. Save it in a folder. I'll probably never open again, too dangerous to share, too important to delete, like a record. You hide under the floorboards. Evidence of damage. We didn't mean to cause an apology to a generation of young men. We basically trained to vanish a confession that we got something wrong, even while we got other things right. Sit in my dark office with the monitor lighting up my hands, 44 years old now. Over 2 decades of feminist work. Countless students' whole career built around making things better. And I honestly can't tell if I did. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe both. At once, think about Ethan and Logan and Tyler, all those guys in my seminars, sitting like they're trying not to take up oxygen. Think about my son, who doesn't date anymore. Think about my nephew in the back row, making himself invisible. Think about the data showing millions of young men retreating into isolation. And I keep hearing the old lessons in my head, like a loop. We told them their presence could be threatening, so they left. We told them to listen instead of speaking, so they went silent. We told them to be aware of their power, and they responded by trying to have none. We told them women's comfort comes first, so they removed themselves from the equation, entirely perfect compliance, catastrophic outcome. And I whisper it to the empty room, like saying it softly might make it less true. Men went quiet because of us saying it out loud. Doesn't fix anything. Doesn't give me a plan, doesn't rewind time, it just names the weight sitting in my chest. The knowledge that righteous intentions don't stop collateral damage, that we broke something while fixing something else. And I don't know how to unbreak it, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it's broken. My reputation is built on certainty, on the idea that everything we did was correct and necessary, and only good, but sitting alone with studies and numbers and voices from isolated young men. I can't hold the certainty anymore. Something went wrong, something is still going wrong. And we did it not with cruelty, not with malice, not because we wanted anyone to suffer, but we did it anyway. And the quiet they left behind is so loud it hurts.